You know, I was like, do wrong is that always like this, so just chill back.
You know, you
It's
still
loud.
get ready.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I've only been
you
out.
had COVID, I had COVID.
I've only been out for 2 weeks.
Oh,
So I haven't been out. So everyone who sees
Okay.
me right now are like just seeing me.
I can just ask her how she's been. How you doing? Been a while.
We're almost out of this. We're almost 2 more weeks with extended, but yeah. Talapalava, Malole, Pulabinaka, Ola, and welcome back to our youth talk show called Generation for Tomorrow. I am your host, Malusel Doris Tulifau. I am the founder of Brown Girl Woke, a nonprofit that trains, educates youth to run workshops for critical issues happening in Samoa.
Yo, Talapalava Samoa, Maro sei fua, whawhiroa atu le maro la whio pena ona mai mō mai. Yo, a wo CJ Loyo, ma le nuu vai moso. Yo, rona leanga whiawhia whaatasi fo I ma le sunga ma le seu e whailoa tu fo. Nei pokalame o umona taula I le tupulanga talvau.
And this is a talk show for youth to talk about youth issues. We talk about mental health. We talk about highlights of amazing youth doing work in Samoa, just so people out there can understand what's happening. It is Mental Health Month, and we're really excited to have our guest today.
Ia, peo na sauna atu e le sunga ia tau sa. Nei pokalame o taula I lava I le tupulanga talvau ina I mwhai. Ona matau fseswani fo I nisi fo I o la tau whai unga e ona whai. Awa fo I le whaleia fo I o la tau soifua malolo ina whal mawhawhau. Ia ma le nei tai au. O a launa whiawhia matau whaatasi fo I ma le sunga ia Moana, Solomona. Ia, o ia fo I o se tasi fo I o councillors fo I. Sa ia o ina fo ia o I le vasinga leo le counselling.
And she's been doing decades and centuries of work all over the world. So we're excited. We were both trained under Moana for a counseling program we did last year to go out into the schools to have counselors. If you're not aware, we don't have counselors, in our high schools or in our elementaries or primary. So the work that Moana is doing is amazing, and there's not enough Moanas out there. So we want to support and promote. Moana, how are you doing?
Good. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Good morning, Tahamanwea. Thank you for inviting me to the group. I'm looking forward to talking to the youth today and answering any questions they have.
I think one of our biggest questions is, how do we explain to adults, if you're a youth, what mental health is? Because it feels so broad. Like, how do you make sure, that, especially for Samoan kids, how do you say, Mom, I have depression, without them looking at you like, depression doesn't pay the bills?
Well, it's how you say it, I think, with our language, because depression isn't, I don't even know if we have an exact word that translates to that. I mean, we have whanua noa, which is sad, and I think it's the conversations they have with their parents and how they say that. I'm sure if they went to their parent and said they've got depression, they would just tell them to go and do the dishes and divert their, attention to something else, which is what they used to do. Try to keep them busy. So I think it's talking to youth about how they can, because they're quite emotional at the time. And, we have a generation that were brought up by a different generation who don't tolerate a lot of that, and they see that as weakness. So I think language is important, and that kind of communication, how they express themselves. Because what's happening is when they can't express themselves, they're making some really bad decisions, and they're choosing either to turn to an addiction or to suicidal thoughts or things like that. So I think that conversation is really important.
I think so. I think a lot of our youth, and there's that communication barrier. Like, your parents never heard of mental health, so be a part of the solution. How do we make sure that the language makes sense? So don't use depression if you know your parents never used depression. Yeah. Maybe a story. We learned last week with Okalani, the way that she talks about climate change to intergenerational older people is telling the story like, Mama, how did the ocean look before? I think the same thing. Mom, how did it feel when, your parents never allowed you to leave the house? Yeah. Those kind of stories. So we have to kind of break it down and take time. CJ, what about you?
Basing off of that, I myself have been trying to juggle between, so I recently got married, and between marriage life and work and my career. And I have crazy ass dreams. And how do I know, is that mental health, or how do I know when to seek help, or where do I find?
Well, when you have a lot on your plate, it's normal for you to feel anxious. You get anxiety because, you've got so many decisions to make, and you've recently got married, and and you've got all these big dreams, which is great. I think you should still have those big dreams, but it is about kind of really sitting down and talking to someone. You can't always get to a therapist or a counselor here, but there are people who will listen to you and will actually try to help you lower that anxiety. Because Doris and I are workaholics, so I sometimes have to tell myself, okay, you don't have to do everything today. But it is about really listening to your thoughts as well. It's okay to feel that anxiety, because those are red flags for you. To okay, I need to call somebody. Especially with youth, they're more likely to go to a friend than to a counselor until they, talk that out. The youth that have come to me through their friends, who've suggested that they come and talk to me because I have been their therapist or their counselor at one time. So yeah, especially with males as well, they think, they got to put that tough exterior on, I've got to get it right. But yeah, it's important what you're saying to yourself, like, okay, I need to talk to somebody. As soon as you feel like it's overwhelming and you're not making good decisions, I asked one of my overseas clients about another young man that I was with. How's he doing? He said, yeah, he's really happy. He's having fun. He his girlfriend wanted a car, so he went and stole it, and she wanted a ring, so he went and stole it. But, he's happy, he's just not making good decisions, I mean, that's a red flag. If your friends are having those kind of conversations, yeah. And I mean, Doris, when you talk about the narrative, I've been to conferences where I always hear that with Indigenous culture, how do they work? What models do they use? Narrative therapy. They tell their story. Because somebody hears it from a different culture and they said, oh man, our culture's like that too. And then you get resolutions, and from those stories, they come up with ways of dealing with anxiety and depression and things like that. So,
when you say that, you ask how they're doing, and the person said they're doing fine, they're stealing cars, and
Yeah.
I feel like that's something in our Samoan community where we whamagalo so many things.
Yeah.
Like, oh, he stole this one time, that's fine. He stole another time, that's fine. I mean, I grew up in a very traditional Samoan church in America, and I remember the treasurer stole money, and that's okay. We're still gonna revote him in,
yeah.
so he can
Forgive.
repeat.
We're gonna forgive, and yeah.
But that's gonna show, our youth it's okay. It's gonna find mangalo, and that's why we're not getting the answers or the solutions we need.
Yeah.
What do we do?
And it's I mean, if you think about the ritual of our ifonga, there's two families that are that act of forgiveness is huge for us because it's a healing process. But there's still a victim who doesn't have a voice, and that victim could be 8 years old, expected to forgive a family member that's violated them, and again her voice is being silenced. And I think with our youth, it's teaching them to find ways to express themselves, whether it's through music or sports or church narratives, because you'll hear in those stories there's something bothering that kid. I mean, when you work with people who are using art therapy, you can see from their pictures that something's going on there. And with me, when I'm talking to clients and they one of them, I've got him to do a dream journal because he has these dreams. And we kind of sit and interpret the dreams, It always goes back to childhood, things that went on in childhood and how they were not able to express themselves, yeah.
I think it's hard too. I had a friend that he was here a few years ago and he did art therapy, and it was hard for him to get a job here. I think because to explain to people like painting is a form of therapy, and it's just hard to gauge with the community here because they don't see it.
Yeah. So you do have to, in each culture, find something that's relevant.
Yes.
Like, I think if you're somebody who's depressed and you get told to just go and make mats all day, I mean, you're already isolated internally, and now you're going to physically, so it's like looking at things that I know at Goshen when they brought Wendy in from Tiapata to do the art therapy. At first they thought it was stupid. And then when they saw the work that they did and, even painting on rocks and stuff, it was really therapeutic. And they just kept it going. They really enjoyed it, so yeah.
I think that's what we do at Brown Girl Woke with a lot of performance arts. At first, a lot of people didn't understand it. They were like, it's just making a space for singers.
Yeah.
But it's the narrative, making sure that they have a voice and use it and make sure they're comfortable as well. We have so much talented youth in Samoa, and we want the support. Even if later on that's not their career, we want to support. CJ is also a musician. He's many things, so I'm sure he's.
As I mentioned earlier, a lot of the youth are not able to express, their feelings towards these kind of topics. And I was wondering because, especially from my experience, a lot of the youth live through people's expectations. Kelo iskanga kai marosia kule. So when they live through people's expectations, they don't really go for what they really want to do.
What they want to do.
So
They're not encouraged to.
they're not encouraged to that. So how can for the youth out there who are going through that same stage, what are some of the ways that they might be able to help out?
Well, I still think because, it's hard when we still have a very strong culture. And those belief systems we have, they put expectations on some. I mean, when I talk to parents, they put expectations on their kids that they would never meet, you know, for a lot of reasons. And so the pressure that puts on you, you know, to have to be somebody that you're not. And that's huge here. I see it a lot here. But again, I think it is about finding that person to talk to, or find those people to at least start that conversation. Because when you at least start a conversation with your friend to say, oh, and I'm sure they do it all the time, oh, I wanted to do this, but my mum wanted me to do this, and, you know, or they want me to go to university, but I want to do this. And so they have those conversations themselves. And I think from there, then at least they've got that group support. Because I know the students that I have that talk to me, they've come to me from a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, or a friend, a teacher heard, or something like that. It is about talking and speaking out and finding those people that you trust in that circle. Yeah.
I know we've talked about it a lot, to make sure you surround yourself with positive people. You know, as a youth, you like your risky friends.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So we're excited to bring up our panel in the next session. If you love our youth panel, they'll be next to ask questions for Moana, but we'll take this break. Talofa Samoa, and welcome back to Generation for Tomorrow, a youth talk show that talks about youth issues. And we're so excited again to have Moana Solomona here to talk to our panel, our youth panel, about real live issues that they're having. So I want our youth panel to introduce themselves really quickly.
Hi, I'm Kahelani.
Hi, I'm Tia Maria.
Talofa, my name's Aoni.
Talofa, my name is Shala.
Dafalava Lungo Principal.
Welcome youth to our discussion this morning. Now it's time for you guys to ask any specific questions to our therapist.
This is your time for your free therapy because this is the only time you'll ever have it for free.
So just to start off, our first question is, what really is mental health and why is it important?
Okay. So mental health talks about your thoughts and your feelings and your behaviors. And it's really important because that's, the person that you are and how you keep that healthy or what happens when it becomes unhealthy. That's it.
As for myself, this year is my senior year and I have upcoming national examinations and it can be stressful. What are some tips you can give me to help me prepare for this upcoming?
Well, first of all, it's absolutely normal at this time of the year because I hear that from students all the time. And then they start, I used to cram. I'm one of those that used to, go out, have fun, and then cram and anxiety, coffee, so all of the wrong things, I did those. But, when you know better, you do better, right? Mm-hmm. I think, especially this time, you really have to try to be organized. And I know it's hard when you live in extended families and there's other stuff. What I finally did to get myself organized is I actually put a calendar up so I could see it, because when you see things visually, it actually is like, okay, I need to do that. When you see it rather than just have it in your head, and I used to start ticking things off. So, recognize it's okay to be anxious, and then start to put a timetable down for these and think. And because in that timetable you'll be writing a timetable, your mother will, or your dad will say, do this, do this, do this. You're expected to do those other things. But just, it's okay to feel anxious. I mean, I think every student across the world at this time, and that's part of growing up. And when you come into adulthood, you probably be like, oh, I don't like being an adult because you've got to make so many decisions. But this is all part of your learning as you're growing to organize yourself a bit better and really focus on your goals, focus on why you're doing this, and
Thank you.
and try to enjoy it without self-harming and drinking too much coffee or alcohol, whatever you do.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
On the topic of depression and what the youth goes through, I know personally a few people who don't like to express themselves, they keep it in. How can you tell that someone is going through a hard time without approaching them? Because when people approach others who are facing tough issues in life, they would rather ignore or avoid the topic of conversation. So how would you tell that someone is going through a hard time?
I think for youth, I think more so with girls and their behavior. It's either really irrational or, they're very manic or they're very isolated and depressed. I think using the word depression is still scary here because it's not part of our normal language. But if you see somebody who, and it could be that they're just somebody who's introverted and they like being alone. But when you're in places like university where you really have to learn to make relationships with people, I think notice in their conversations when they're talking, whether it's always kind of on a down, just notice the way they are, whether they're sluggish or they just look like they're sad all day, every day. So it's about noticing things like that. And you can talk to that person without ever saying the word depression. And it is about that conversation, how you doing, and And it's okay to ask them, are you okay? I think youth they're so scared to talk about the topic now, they're even too scared to say, are you okay? You know, and it doesn't have to be the whole, are you okay?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, hey, are you okay? You know, I mean, that's how you say it. I think it's how you say it without them thinking you're being fake, you know. So, yeah. I think when I was training these guys, I was talking to them about when you train as a counselor, your first tools are your eyes because you see things. And for a long time, and still now, there's a lot of bystanders. They see things, but they're too scared to get involved, and so they just turn a blind eye. Yeah. So yeah, just you know, watch and listen. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a flower one. It's a journal. It's a le mental health for the so for malolo, pole malolo in on my for ia o te leiloi ia o soa tau ia penga ia se whawhitau rin tupu ia la toa o mafuta i fo i masisi tangata i le tūlava leo le awhi o le mawhauwhau ia ona o au e o best friend o te taua whaasista tua whine ia sa matu mafuta lastia i le aonga NUS ia o Charlene ia sa whapena ona commit to suicide ia o le mafuanga o ke lon mafuanga o le health o le mental o le lava le malolo ino le mafofau o le afuanga foi o committed suicide ona o tele fa fitau li no mafofau ai le lopo ai a fa so ai ai o te tono manto ana wo po ana best friends ia o mato le si awala e tono fa so ai ma ave ai le vai la au ma ave ai le fa mafanfnanga ai pe tai ia wo fo ia matu o matu lesi fa fitauli a faila o va to uma tangata ia e trusting e tangata le fa fit o le o fa fitauli o le ala sisi mea na te faia e fo ia e ia lona fa fitauli pe a fai wale ia sisi e au na fa so ia
I think for youth today, it's important that you have people in whenkokalango so that you can go and talk to that person. There's they're still very depressed and you've had that conversation and I think that's when you seek a professional or that's when you will talk to a teacher or student services. You know, find that next level for so that you're not carrying it or because you know when someone commits suicide, I fear for younger war and everybody that knew them, you know, they're also affected. And, you know, I mean, that's what we call in my field secondary trauma. When somebody suffers trauma and you're affected by it, you know, then you now suffer secondary trauma. I think to remember when somebody has those suicidal thoughts, they do have a form of depression, you know, because it's like they're in a black hole and they don't know how to get out, you know. But when you're able to get them to talk about it, sometimes they still feel alone. And so it is about you guys talking and what else can you do. But at the same time, don't take so much on so that, you know, you're so affected by it, Manku, you also are a student. You're doing things so important to find that next person, whether it is a teacher or another adult, somebody who can help you to help that person. Because I think the more people that know about it, you know, the more people it can help.
And we'll be right back after this break. Talofa Samoa, and welcome back to Generation for Tomorrow. We are with our amazing youth panel and Moana Solomona asking questions. I think our next person is Tia.
Talofa Moana, thank you for that. My question would be on, so it is based on research, the rate of men committing suicide is always much higher than women. So my question will be on why is it that you think that men find it really hard to open up about their emotions from your experience?
Okay, from my experience and just generally, it's really that perception that people have of males and that masculinity. Because, you know, even the topics that we are talking about now in Samoa about sexual abuse, there is more reporting from females, but I'm sure definitely that it's also with males, but it's the way, well, in our culture, for example, there is an expectation that they are the strong one. They are able to deal with things, and so, and for them to talk about it comes across as weakness. And so they just carry on, and you know, they either turn to alcohol and drugs or you know, bad relationships and things like that, but they will not talk about their emotions. It's too hard. And it is, I think, in our culture, it is seen as a sign of weakness. And so that relationship is really important, like father-son or male role models are important. I mean, with my son, from a very young age, but you know, poor kid was my guinea pig. I used to say to him, you know, if you get angry, you need to tell me because I can't read your mind. So at a very young age, he goes, "Ula keika." I'm like, okay, you know, I'm angry, you know. So it's your environment. I mean, if you're brought up in a house where you're said, you know, when your father and uncle says, "Ao kangi vale," or you know, harden up. And I've heard men say that, you know, you just got to harden up, you're a boy. So I think that whole masculinity thing plays on that across the cultures, not just Samoan, that it's a sign of weakness for you to say that, you know, even I've had cases where the male says his wife hits him too. I mean, I looked at the size of him and the size of his wife. I think there's a difference between fear and anger, you know, but it's real for him, you know. It's like, you know, you hurt me too. So, I mean, it's harder for men to speak out when there's an expectation that they just have to take it. But if you have brothers, nephews, and, you know, I think you talk to them, you know, about their emotions and say, you know, if you're angry, if you're sad, you know, I mean, why is it okay for a little boy to cry when they're little and as soon as they're old enough? Oh, koe kangi, mate, you know, and we're actually teaching them to not talk, to not have feelings, to not, you know, because it's straight away e kangi, go, you know, and it's like, you know. So we're teaching them as a culture or as parents to not feel anything. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. I hope that clarified it for the men out there.
You guys can cry if you want to.
Yes.
It's okay.
I don't know why I brought up, like, in my mind, Johnny Depp.
Yeah, definitely.
The whole world is watching that.
That's why I asked.
That might be different. I think CJ has a question.
No, I was just having some sort of flashback when you guys were talking about that. But especially for the men, they have a lot of friends. They go through relationship problems. And then when they go to their other friends, like other guy friends, and they say, men have feelings. And not just, you know, the females that should take care of themselves, but for the men as well, because they're equally the same. If I be maurunga ko langonga kenge ngai lo langonga kama, so fisilia ko ai I lo sunga mon. Po angi va inga valem feyonga promote because we can all become counselors, because every friend needs someone that they can turn to. Po angi e wala fenga promote especially the youth, Because not every day, you know, we go through like the same challenges. Some days might be harder, some days might be, you know, just the easy ones.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good idea to have an awareness campaign on that, because it's true, especially with, well, you know, young males. I mean, I'm sure with the females, you know, when they're having relationship problems and they go to their boyfriends or their guy friends and they'll say, oh, is he, you know, like this, and then they'll say, let's go and have a drink. And it's happened, I've seen it, you know, and they'll go have a drink and then they're telling their friends, okay, pole, okay, you know, blah, blah, blah. Then they go, and as soon as their friend gets drunk and he's already thrown his phone, doesn't want to talk to the girl, as soon as he gets drunk, he's going, oh, I love her, I want to talk to her, you know, all the emotions come out when you, but it's really important that you acknowledge that, and especially for young males. You know, it's, I mean, if you ever become a counselor or therapist and you work with somebody, an 18-year-old whose heart's broken and is literally sitting in front of you and you can see their heart breaking, I mean, it's hard to talk through that because there's a sense of rejection and abandonment. So boys are good. They'll talk about things, but they don't talk directly. They try to make a joke out of it, and they say, "Oi koe pole foi ngā ngai koe wharelei," you know. And yet they're doing it, and yet there's pain. You know, they're still hurting, and that's why, you know, when they talk about youth events and things. They're very good in our cultures talking around it, and not actually. I mean, when you go to a place and there's people that have been there for domestic violence and say, "Oh, have they had any counselling around the violence?" Well, yeah, he's in the vegetable group, he's in the church group, and they're not actually talking about what. And you know, what happens is, and what often happens is, as young males, when they can't talk about it or they go to their friends and they make a joke about it, they then get into a relationship, for example. And when the wife is not listening to them or validating them, then they get angry. And then you often hear them say, oh, I was drunk. But before they got drunk, they had an argument with the wife, then they went and got drunk, and then there's always something happening before. And I think this is, when you have big youth events, and this is when you should talk about those things, because in that audience, there'll be a lot of guys going, yeah, man, that's me. You know, and not being afraid to actually say to your friends, you know what, I'm actually heartbroken. I actually do feel pain, and I don't want to laugh about it anymore. And they're like, okay, you know, it's when you say it directly, then they realize, oi, sole, you know, and not be afraid to show your emotions, not be afraid to say, you know, well, I didn't sleep last night. I felt like my heart was gonna come out of my chest. It's hard to say those things because you think it's going to get out to the whole community, but it is. You have to be honest with yourself, and I'm always saying, find that go-to person, pick up the phone, text somebody. I mean, you guys are the technology generation. Text someone. When someone texts you that they're feeling suicidal thoughts, that's a cry for help. You know, it doesn't mean they're actually going to do it. But that's the start of a conversation, you know, and especially for males, I think we need to teach males how to better show their emotions, and that it's okay to, you know, because they're going to go to their guy friends, you know, and they're going to be like, you know, going to do the staunch thing, and then it's like, you know, so it's, you know, that's when your emotions come out when you're drinking, but you know, be real. I mean, let's do a campaign. Be real, you know. It's for females are more likely to, you know, to bring out their emotions and tell you when they're angry. It's harder with males, but and that's why when couples argue, like youth, you know, the female, she wants to talk about everything, and he doesn't, you know, because he doesn't know how to express himself. And most so, you know.
I know that Prince never has those kind of conversations. We'll be right back after this break.
Welcome back, Samoa. This is our last segment for our show this morning, and we will be sharing words of encouragement and what we have learned from our clinical therapist, Moana Solomon. And we'll start with Lani.
I just wanted to add on to what Moana said about how males find it hard to open up. I think one thing that's really important for everyone watching and all of us here is that one of the best ways we can make a change is by being the change ourselves. If you are a trustworthy friend to your male or female friends, it will be easier for them to open up to you. So you need to start and be the example of being that friend. And some words of encouragement. I know the raw truth is that sometimes, in my experience, sometimes there won't be a friend. Sometimes you won't have someone. But as a Christian nation, it's really good to remember that God is always there. We have a God and a Savior that's always listening to us. So speak to them and speak to your friends and be that safe haven for them. Thank you.
Wonderful. I would just like to add to what Moana left us with before our break. To our male audience, just know that you are valid, you are appreciated, and I think I speak for everyone when I say that the Johnny Depp trial has been really inspiring for all of us when it comes to male rights. So if you are in a domestic violence relationship or at home, please speak up. Sometimes you find a safe space in strangers, just like myself. If, reach out to each and every one of us or follow our page, Brown Girl Woke. And words of encouragement, I would like to quote Pitbull. Every day above ground is a great day. Remember that. So no matter what, just know that being alive is better than not being alive. So I just want to encourage everyone on the other side of the screen that we love you, we value you, and I hope that in time our community learns to accept that mental illness is a thing and it is very much alive. And so friends, please talk to your friends, check on your people, even hi, how are you goes a long way. And our parents too, please, I plead, check on your children. We are not okay, so if you tell everyone we are, just know that we aren't. And once again, you are valid, and thank you for tuning in, and love you, and see you next week. Thank you.
Tia, you're definitely correct. Communication is key. You need to know that it is okay to reach out. It is okay to talk. It is okay to not be okay. All you need to do is be like, hey, are you okay? Do you need advice? I'm here for you, It's important to know that you can be the change for someone, like Lani said. You could reach out to your friends, your family. You can talk to your parents. It is okay. Just be like, hey, Mom, Dad, I've been going through something. And I think it's really important that it's okay to not be tough. You can be weak at times because that's the only way you'll get through this. And I think that it's really important to understand that communication is definitely the key to opening up about yourself and stay woke.
I don't think there isn't anything that hasn't been said, right? Opening up isn't a sign of weakness. If you can open up and be completely real with someone, then it's a sign of strength, because not everyone can feel comfortable in opening up. But just know that after every storm is a rainbow, and the rainy days don't always last. There's always the sunshine after the rain, the calm after the storm. And, find your safe space, your safe people, and know that even if you don't have that safe place, you can create your own safe space for yourself. Just be comfortable with your own reality. Yeah, that's it.
And last words from Moana.
I just want to support everything everyone has said. I think you guys all have it, communicating and being that person that they go to. Also, being comfortable in yourself. It's not just your physical self, but your spiritual self. People worry about being alone, but there's a difference between being alone and being lonely. And so it is talk to that person. And, you guys are forever on your phones and computers. That one message can go a long way. So communication is huge. And don't be afraid to show your emotions. Don't be afraid to talk to your guy friends. And you know what they're like. Their way of supporting is making a joke out of it, but you can have a serious conversation within that laughter. So just keep talking. Really, really reach out and be that change. Yeah.
I definitely the same sentiment of be the change you want to see. Is like a huge thing for myself as well. It's kind of hard, like being that change, because then you're making the accountability on yourself. You gotta walk the talk, and it feels like, do I want to do this? But we need to. We're in a generation where you guys are going through COVID. We don't understand as adults or parents. Everyone needs to talk. Suicide rates have hiked in this last few years, and you guys are using internet to talk about these hard issues. We need to talk to people in real life as well, because we can't reach you, and internet is faster. So trying to figure out, how do I reach somebody that's out there before they use the internet for something negative, and how do we use it for something positive? So we just want to thank you, Moana, for being here. I think especially a free session, because Moana's not free.
Always free for you.
It's something that we need and we don't get enough. Prince was talking earlier about, what if you have best friends and you still don't go to them? And we talked about it. Sometimes going to a stranger is easier for somebody because they won't have, any biases or judgment, because it's like you feel like they're going to take you without any judgment. But you also got to be aware the person that's a stranger is somebody that's a professional, just not any random person, because it could be something that could be triggering or negative. Thank you again, Moana. I think I'm trying not to cry. We do want to give this time to Prince to end our show and dedicate this to his close friend.
E upo le pese na masengo falongo ilunga le pase fapia tu ilunga savali ese file mu awal fefe o upunga le pese o fio ki falongo le upunga le pese ia lo itawo I fo I tupulanga lo falongo mai a misi fo la to lo mawaina nei pokalami a fai se fafitau li lo mafofau pe de o malolo ina lo mafofau ona o se fafitau li lo sio manga o te fautua inga o e tu ilunga savali ese file mu awal fefe o upuna le pese e se malu itau ilo nei tangata en faifo no fa pea o le faio friends po best friends kangaka e ke trustinga e ma faio mfiswangi ya o yo fa fikauli ia fa te inga o le a faio tene ia faiso kai best friend ona e malama lo kai best friend I mea o lo tutupu I tama I le olanga nei e malama a faifo o tama faiso girl best friend e malam le tene I le soifuanga fa tene en fa fio soani ate o e pe ai so fa fitau li fa le fainga wo ia e ngata I lea o matua I fa nau ia e fautuina lava o le e ile upu fa pe e sina mama fatu le tala nei lo le sasa e itanga te sasa ia nga le kangi le aso e kasi ko uma ai a fa se tala I sitangata e mawhai ona atua le tau sanga o manatua I le tangata tala ma e ti ngā ia ma e awa ona whaatino I nai ia nisi o whawhitau lupe o le pule le ola ona o le mamafo le tala I te lafo I nei se tangata whautua I nai mātua a wane I lafo se upu mamafo I whanau a whaifo e lafo I mawhai ona toe au mai le whanau ma toe whautua ia whamangalo I mawhaifo ona toe whato e se whanau I ni mawhai lava ona whaititia nei vaenga o le pule le ola talu ai o le malolo ino le mafofau ia pe ona tosi fia pe ona ta o Doris ia ia lo best friends sa fa pe ona le masina nei tau sanga o mavae ia sa sfatino ina ile tulanga o le pule lola ona o nisi fo fa fitau li ma fo fau ona le tele o fa fitau li ma fo fau ai manto te as a friend I apologize ile because makile I fisosoangi lo fa fikauli ma ko best friend makile fisosoangi a o ma ko lesi fa fikauli so kai minge ya kia o a vele le meu kupu le best friend ile o best friend nea ia masile songa o ke o lai ia awa lavange o koe kuua so friend o ai lava mga o mia au ia o te talanoa ma o fasoa ma o fisosoani ai o ai foi o mana o mia ia o ai foi o mana o mia ia fisosoani mea tau mental health fafiso tai mai mantu kulupu po le sunga foi ia Doris tu fau ia fai fon fisosoani ante o iso fafitaoli ia ai matu te lofa tele lofa tu foi I matu o so matu best friend o Saline alofa tia te o lua lo mai mo me savai ia alofa tele atu foi I a inga uma ma wolo foi no mafuta mai I de neiva inga le aso
Uamapu I foletino I tofanga I le bongisa Mafafanga ele saloto e mafatia peshe pa ota tafia